On July 14, 2023, the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, went on strike. A few months prior to that, the Writers Guild of America also went on strike. This would be the first time that both of these unions went on strike since the 1960s. And that's because both the writers and actors want to be paid more for producing content on streaming services, and the fear that AI is going to take over their jobs. At first, these strikes seemed hopeful to these unions, because they believed that big media companies would finally listen to them, and they would be paid enough so they don't have to resort to a second-hand job. However, as the strikes went on, it became very clear that Disney, Universal, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Amazon, and all the other media companies would rather want the strikes to die down than give them what they want. The strikers are acting so ridiculous now that they seem like the bad guys, and these strikes aren't benefiting consumers in any way. So today, let's talk about the many problems of the WGA and SAG strikes and how I predict these strikes will be resolved. Now, before I start talking about the problems, we need to establish what they're actually fighting for in the first place. The main issue that the writers and actors are fighting for is to get royalties from streaming services for shows and movies that they are a part of. Now, most of you might be confused by this, because I bet you think that writers and actors are paid a fixed amount for the show or movie they help produce, and don't get paid until they're a part of another show or movie. Well, I can't confirm this for movies, at least movies made for theaters. Before the age of streaming, TV channels would pay the writers and actors residuals for each time the channel reran an episode they were a part of. Now granted, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it helped them live comfortably until they can find another gig. Because while they can make between $70,000 and $150,000 per show initially, they live in California, guys. Who's going to be able to live in California with that kind of wage? But ever since the market has been oversaturated with streaming services, big media companies have pretty much stopped giving royalties to these people. Now, I don't know the complete reason why they don't do it anymore, but if I had to guess, it's because these companies don't want anybody to know the ratings of their shows, mostly to keep their stock price from tanking if a bunch of shows do very poorly. But I also think that it makes it easier for them not to pay any royalties, since writers and actors won't know how much their show's been watched. So financially speaking, back in the day, it actually mattered if the show you worked on was popular or not, because that means you would get a ton of money off of it. But because of streaming, it doesn't matter how popular a show is, you're going to be paid just about the same as if you worked on a show that gets canned after only 10 episodes. There's also been an issue, particularly with the writers, that they are not working as much as they used to because big media companies are using less writers in the writer's room, and they work for fewer weeks in a year. I would go into further details, but honestly I don't fully understand the situation going on in this. The second major issue that they're fighting for is the use of AI in Hollywood. See, the writers are concerned that AI is going to take over their jobs because it can write scripts much faster than they can, and the studios don't have to pay the AI anything. Although I honestly don't think the writers should be too concerned about AI taking over their jobs, because the courts recently ruled that anything made by AI is in the public domain. AI can also be used to mimic the actor's face and voice, so that they only need the actor to work maybe a day to get their body and voice scanned.
When everybody's excited that, hey, we got a robot that can do this, good, you just took Juan Sanchez out of a job.
Granted, it hasn't gotten to the point where you can't tell the difference between the AI and the actual person, but I wouldn't be surprised if we got close to that in the next 5 years. While these issues are important to fight for in their workforce, I just don't think that these issues are going to be solved by the end of this. Let's first start off with the very obvious problem that when you go on strike, you don't work. And when you don't work, you don't get any money. And if you don't make any money, it's going to be very difficult to live. Now granted, these strikes are effective enough to make the media companies lose billions of dollars, but it's not going to be enough to make them go bankrupt if they don't listen to these unions. And even if they were getting close to bankruptcy, it would just be better for them to let the strikes wear off, because the strikers' proposals would put them in even deeper debt. You see, just about every company that has made their own streaming service has lost billions of dollars off of it already, and that's without paying the writers and actors any residuals. If they were forced to pay these residuals for these shows and movies, they would have to cut costs by either making less shows or reducing the amount of people that work on a show. I don't know about you, but that kind of defeats the purpose of striking if it's just about making it financially stable for all of the writers and actors. Then there's the fact that they allow these independent studios to stay in production, which granted they aren't tied to the unions in the first place, but they're allowing A-list actors to act in them, which they don't need the money in the first place, while they're having all the other writers and actors stand for hours in the scorching sun protesting, living off of food scraps people give them. They probably lost their homes too, if they could afford one to begin with. And despite that, the union leaders still won't allow them to work in any way. And these big media companies are gonna be picking up these shows and movies anyways! I know you gotta stand up for your rights, but when you make an exception that not only doesn't help any of the struggling strikers, but also helps the companies you're striking against, you might as well not even strike in the first place! Then there's how the strikers themselves are treating everybody that's against them. Now I bet I'm gonna get a few comments in the comments section that say,
"Ew, how dare you make fun of us strikers? You are worse than these evil companies that use us as slaves."
and then I'll reply to them, "You've just proved my point. If you criticize these strikers in any way, no matter how small or ridiculous it is, they are going to slam you to the ground. Especially if you are a YouTuber because, well, nobody respects YouTubers in Hollywood. But also they have the most influence on how people perceive the strikes. And since YouTubers aren't obligated to these unions, they are still allowed to make content for YouTube, which results in more people flocking over to YouTube since that's the only platform that has any new content. This approach backfires significantly because if they keep complaining about the tiniest criticisms or jokes that aren't necessarily criticizing them, YouTubers aren't going to take them seriously and don't want to support their cause. And if YouTubers don't support the unions, then who else is going to support them? These problems themselves pretty much ruin any chance the unions have to get what they want. But I think the biggest problem with these strikes doesn't involve the big media companies, the YouTubers, or even the strikers themselves. It involves us, the consumers. Alright, let's assume that the writers and actors do get everything that they wanted. How will this benefit the general audience or the people actually watching the movies and shows? Honestly, I think it would be even worse for them once the strikes end. You see, in the past few years, movies and shows have really gone down the tank. Partially because they've gotten more political, but mainly because they've been oversaturated with sequels, remakes, reboots, spin-offs, overuse of IPs, and unoriginal stories. And, I hate to say this, but the writers are partially in fault of this. And once they get back to work, I don't see them changing how they write at all. It makes it even worse if they actually get paid more for writing the same garbage that's ruining Hollywood. And AI could do just as good of a job as they can. I mean, I know AI can only make formulaic stories and ideas, but how's that much different from modern writers anymore? There's also the fact that I mentioned earlier, that movies and shows have just gotten so political these days, and honestly, I think it's gonna be even worse. I don't know exactly why that's the case, But it seems like millennials and Gen Zers want to shove their political beliefs in everybody's faces and thinks that everybody's gonna like it. Well, listen up, all you writers and actors, and even you directors too. Nobody in the general audience wants to hear your beliefs. When I want to watch a movie or show, I want to escape reality, not remind myself I'm still in it. And when a movie or show not only talks about the same garbage I hear every day, but I feel like it's attacking me personally, why would I keep watching it, let alone support the people who worked on it? And most of the strikers are the one pushing political beliefs in shows and movies in the first place. Look, if you want to express your beliefs, just don't do it in a show or movie that doesn't need it. Oh, and one more thing. All these companies that claim that they support your beliefs, they don't. All they care about is the money they think they can make off of consumers who ignorantly think that the company actually supports what they believe, when in reality the companies could actually turn back on the beliefs they claim to have if that means that they can make more profit. Not that it had anything to do with this video, it was just a perfect time to say that. In conclusion, while the writers and actors do have legitimate reasons to strike, the strikes are almost pointless since they allow big actors to still act in independent movies. They're not completely stopping the studios from getting new shows and movies. Their hypocrisy and their attitude towards people who are against their strikes make the writers and actors look worse than if they didn't go on strike in the first place. And the general public is not going to benefit from this no matter what happens, because the strikes aren't going to fix the quality of shows and movies that modern day Hollywood is producing. The only positive thing I can think of that will come out of these strikes is that maybe independent studios will have more power when it comes to creating content, but with how the big media companies have been power hungry lately, I very much doubt that'll be the case. But in the end, only God really knows what's gonna happen after these strikes, and who knows, maybe I'm completely wrong and we're heading towards another golden age for shows and movies. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. And don't worry, I'll make another video in the near future.